All right, good evening and welcome to the Administration, Finance, Recreation, and Parks Committee meeting for September 19th, 2023. Our elected body present, Mayor Kurt Wilson, Councilmember Christine Hall, Councilmember Michael Palermo, Councilmember Sarah Beeson, Councilmember G. Lee Hills, Councilmember William Morthland. The purpose of committee meetings are for city departments to convey information to mayor and council and discuss initiatives listed on the published agenda and provide updates of vital information essential for city operations. By ordinance, committee consists of mayor, members of city council, and the city administrator. The city administrator serves as chair of these committee meetings. This is a public meeting, but not a public hearing. Therefore, while the meeting is certainly open to the public and the public is welcome, we do not generally take public comments or questions during committee meetings. Questions are received at the regular city council meetings at 7 o'clock p.m. in city council chambers on the second and fourth Monday of each month, as well as fifth Monday in open forum. We do encourage residents to engage our online platforms. If you have any questions, please reach out to members of our staff team and talent who are available to provide that information to you. We also encourage the viewing audience to visit the city website for meetings, events, and departmental information. And also the city web service portal is a mechanism to report issues or concerns, and we certainly encourage everyone to utilize the City of Roswell app and also visit roswell365.com for a calendar of events. The first item on the agenda for this evening is the approval of the minutes for the Administration and Finance and Recreation and Parks Committee meeting for August 15th, 2023. Motion to approve by Councilmember Beeson. Second by Councilmember Hills. Any further discussion? All in favor? All right, thank you. Passes unanimously. The next item, or let me note that under administration, we have no action items. Under finance, no action items. Recreation and parks, item number 2 is listed on the agenda. Consideration to approve renovations to 150 Frank Lewis Drive. Approval for the mayor and/or city administrator to execute contracts with prime contractors in the amount of $99,553.28 and a total budget authorization of $114,486.27. Mr. Malone.
Good evening, sir. Yes, this item is specific to the renovations of the building located at 150 Frank Lewis Drive. Currently, this building houses about 30 of our full-time staff that are directly inputted into our daily operations. So what we would like to suggest is, if approved, this dollar amount and these enhancements to that facility would significantly improve a facility that hasn't been touched in over 30 years. This would provide necessary improvements to support the present and future operations that would be located out of that facility, which would include such things as a break room that include lockers that would allow staff to come in at the start of their shift and actually change into their daily operating uniforms that they need, as well as at the end of their shifts be able to change out and go home and clock out. We would also expect to expand the current restroom support system that's there right now as it stands. Employees have to wait to go to the restroom when there's more than one that are going into those current situated stalls. So we would look to enhance and improve that facility for those staff that are operating out of that. Happy to answer any questions if you have.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Malone? Yes, Councilmember Hills.
Thank you, Mr. Knighton. I think this is awesome. This is absolutely indicative of neglect of our facilities and rec and parks for so long, and 30 years is a great big number in my opinion. So I'm delighted to see this upgraded, and I will certainly be approving this or supporting this. Actually, I'll just approve it myself. But I appreciate Councilmember Morthland pushing on this as well. And then can you tell me briefly, most of the folks that are what do you say, not housed here, but operate out of here regularly, do they cover just a certain part of our city, or is it certain departments within Park and Rec?
So specifically, this is Recreation and Parks housed parks operational staff. We have crews that are stored and facilitate their office space as well as storage space out of there. We have the turf crew, the construction crew. We have the new, we are hiring currently for that historic assets crew that's coming on, and when they come on, we're going to need storage and office space for them as well. So that all is indicative of everyone that kind of facilitates starts and operates out of this facility on a daily basis and even on the weekends.
That's awesome. And I know we're working on that multi-use trail along Oxbow there, so there'll be a nice break space if they want to get out of the building sooner than later. So thank you. I will absolutely be supporting this.
Thank you.
Councilmember Beeson.
Just a quick clarifying question. I went through, I can find the scope of work, I can find the work order. I don't see any bid documents. Was this done to an on-call vendor that we already had existing and a provided scope of work, or was this bid out?
So this went through a Gordian state contract, so prime contractor, it falls under that Gordian state contract, which allows for that bid process and moving forward a little more efficiently.
Perfect, thank you.
Councilmember Hall.
And this is, what budget line item is this coming from?
So this is actually, a portion of this is actually out of a bond-funded project that we're able to pull resources from the bond-funded project that goes into the infrastructure pieces associated with this, as well as some money coming out of our parks operation budget from that perspective as well.
Any further questions? Seeing none, we'll entertain a motion. Motion by Councilmember Morthland, second by Councilmember Hills. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right, thank you. Passes unanimously. That being the only item on the Administration and Finance and Recreation and Parks Committee meeting, I'll ask for a motion of adjournment. Motion by Councilmember Morthland, second by Councilmember Hills. All in favor on the motion of adjournment? Thank you very much. We will now move in 30 seconds while we reset.
We're betting against you, Joe. They're betting against you. I'm rooting for you, but they're betting against you.
All right. All right, we are ready to transition to Public Safety and Public Works Committee meeting. Good evening and welcome to the Public Safety and Public Works Committee meeting for September 19, 2023. And for the record, our elected body present, Mayor Kurt Wilson, Councilmember Christine Hall, Councilmember Michael Palermo, Councilmember Sarah Beeson, Councilmember G. Lee Hills, Councilmember William Morthland. The purpose of these committee meetings are to convey information to the mayor and council on initiatives listed on the published agenda, and by ordinance, the committee consists of the mayor, city council, and the city administrator who serves as chair of committee meetings. This is a public meeting, but not a public hearing. Therefore, while the public is certainly welcome, we do not generally take public comments or questions at committee meetings unless specifically authorized by mayor and council. Public comments or questions are received on the second and fourth Monday of each month in city council meetings in city council chambers, as well as the fifth Monday in open forum. We do encourage residents to access our online platforms, and if you have any needs or questions, please contact our city staff talent, and we'll be glad to provide that information to you. We would also encourage the viewing audience to access the city website for departmental information, as well as utilizing the city web service portal, the Roswell app, to report issues or concerns. Please visit roswell365.com for a calendar of events. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the Public Safety and Public Works committee meeting for August 15th, 2023. Motion by Councilmember Beeson, second by Councilmember Hills. All in favor? Thank you. Passes unanimously. Under Public Safety Fire, item number 2 is listed on the agenda, consideration to approve the Public Safety Service Agreement with the City of Mountain Park for fire and rescue services. Chief Panino.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a revision of the existing IGA between Roswell and Mountain Park to provide fire and emergency medical services. The intent behind this revision, the original IGA was signed 2 years ago. It's about a page long. This better defines the roles and responsibilities of both parties. Some examples of that are, for example, emergency management's not our responsibility in Mountain Park. It clearly defines if there's times of disasters, our responsibility is to Roswell and not to Mountain Park. It also talks about authority. The last thing that we want to do when we're responding into another city that may or may not have a fire department available that day is be confused about who's in charge at a particular incident. This clearly defines lines of authority, that if we are on scene, the scene is ours and we have authority over that incident until such time that we leave the scene. This agreement has a 90-day out for either party, and really that's the update in the agreement is to better kind of define the responsibilities of the parties. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Councilmember Morthland.
When Roswell shows up on the scene to combat the fire, the emergency, whatever the case may be, Mountain Park has already signed this. They are aware and have no issues with us being in 100% control, correct?
They've signed the agreement. They haven't brought any concerns to us.
Thank you. Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mr. Knighton. So, Chief, I have two questions. So one question is, from the looks of it, the pricing logic or the cost logic is identical to the previous agreement?
Correct.
So that's one question. And Chief Conroy, be aware, I'm going to ask the same exact two questions to you. So my second question is certainly understand the need and the partnership regarding emergency services. Want to verify that we are focused on doing emergency type needs when there's truly a need. This is not something for the Roswell Fire Department just to be there in the community when there's not a need for the fire department. Is that right? My better example is police. So in reality, my real question is going to be focused on speed enforcement and things like that. But just in general, would there be any reason that one of your trucks would be going out there if not for a call for needed service from your department?
No.
Thank you. I'll have more specific ones for Chief Conroy.
All right. Any further questions or comments? Councilman, any further questions or comments?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Councilmember Beeson, second by Councilmember Hills. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All in favor? All right, thank you. All right. Thank you, Chief Panino. All right, Public Safety Police, item number 3, consideration to approve the agreement for 911 and dispatching services between the City of Roswell and the City of Mountain Park. Chief Conroy.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Seated beside me is John Petrobosky, the city's 911 director. And much like the last item for fire, this is an agreement just clarifies some of the vagueness that's in the present agreement with the City of Mountain Park. The pricing methodology remains the same as it did for the last agreement, but it just does clarify some things about dispatching and exactly what dispatching entails, and provides also some reporting mechanisms that we can provide some reports to the City of Mountain Park that they've been requesting.
Thank you, Chief Conroy. Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mr. Knighton. Chief, I have two questions. So first question is, the cost logic looks identical to what the original agreement was. Is there any change to the cost structure?
Correct. It's exactly the same as it was previously.
Excellent. And then second question is, with this just being the 911 services and the dispatching services, that means that there's no time a Roswell police officer is being called into, obviously, excluding catastrophic type events. There's no typical time when a Roswell police officer is being called into Mountain Park. Is that correct?
Correct. This exactly clarifies that we transfer law enforcement calls to the Fulton County Dispatch Center for the Sheriff Department to respond. They provide their law enforcement services for the City of Mountain Park.
Excellent. And then just a question I have, a third one that I think is probably a little less related to this, more specific for just Roswell. If following a violent criminal or something like that, where you're following them, that's something where you would be able to follow them into Mountain Park, or how would that work, out of curiosity? I know that's outside the scope of this agreement.
Correct. Yeah, law enforcement officers, there's a new law in the state of Georgia that came in last year that law enforcement officers can operate regardless of jurisdiction if they observe a crime in progress.
Interesting. Thank you.
All right. Any further questions or comments? Councilmember Beeson?
Motion to approve this item?
All right, motion by Councilmember Beeson.
Barring Councilmember Palermo seeking asylum in Mountain Park, I second.
If Mayor Wood was here, he'd give the history of how Mountain Park came about, which did deal with that asylum.
Can't turn off my mic, oh boy. Full of batteries.
So we have a motion by Councilmember Beeson, and I believe a second by Councilmember Hills. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right, thank you, passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you. Under Public Works, item number 4, consideration to award a contract to Site Engineering Incorporated for the Asbury Park Drive Stormwater Project in an amount not to exceed $191,325. Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. Sorry. All right. So the purpose of this project is to repair a failed 30-inch diameter section of corrugated metal pipe that has caused a sinkhole between two residents, about 16 feet between two different residences. And those residences are on Asbury Park Drive. Due to the characteristics of this failure, this project actually is the highest ranked project on our stormwater CIP list. And EPW recommends awarding this contract to Site Engineering. Take any questions?
Questions or comments for Mr. Watson or for discussion? Councilmember Beeson.
Quick question, looking at the stipulated price agreement between owner and contractor, to clarify in this, Columbia Engineering is going to be acting as the owner's representative in this? That was the paperwork we were provided, just want to make sure we're voting on the right.
So the Columbia Engineering would not be the owner's rep. Columbia Engineering did the design. So we have them if we need to have any questions, but our stormwater utility manager will serve as the owner's rep.
Got it. It's packet page 69, Article 3, Engineer 3.01. Columbia Engineer will act as owner's representative, assume all duties and responsibilities of engineer, and will have rights and authorities assigned to the engineer in the contract.
You say that page again?
Sorry, packet page 69. It's right behind Exhibit A, foreseeable bad weather days.
Article 3, 3.0.
Yeah, so I see that now. It will still be managed by the stormwater utility manager.
That's what I want to make sure. So
Yeah.
in other words, we're not taking this outside of the city scope, giving it
That's
to a third
correct.
party. We are still managing it.
Correct, but we
Got it.
still want Columbia Engineering there because they were the
They
ones
did
that did the design. This
That's
will be
helpful.
followed by Site Engineering.
Perfect. That's good. Thank you.
I apologize for the delay in the response.
No worries. There are many, many, many pages in this exhibit that were provided to us. I appreciate it.
Further questions or yes, Councilmember Hills.
One quick one. I'm assuming this will go through tonight. About how long will it take to get this project started?
It's a pretty risky project, and it's a very deep pipe. We're hoping the work will be done within 30 days.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll entertain a motion. Motion, Councilmember Morthland. Motion to approve, Councilmember Morthland. Second, Councilmember Hills. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right, passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Item number Item number 5, revisions to UDC Articles 12.5 Stormwater Management and 13.2 Review Authority. Mr. Watson.
Mr. Knight, this item is to recommend revisions to Section 12.5 and 13.2 of the Unified Development Code of the City of Roswell to allocate sole authority over stormwater to Environmental Public Works and/or their designee. This is part of the mayor and council's overall consolidated comprehensive stormwater strategy. This item, if it's approved, then goes to mayor and council for initiation, and then we have to go through the process of going through planning. And I will take any questions.
Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you. So, first of all, I absolutely am very glad that there's more of a focus on stormwater and the issues that can occur with stormwater. Literally on my drive here, I was on with a resident having a stormwater issue. That call is certainly not unique. That's a resident call I feel like I get a lot. So definitely very happy with a consolidated approach to support resident needs around that. I guess my concern or questions are around that. If you look at the applicability criteria, it's basically, so it's packet page 80. Not that I have any concerns with the applicability criteria. My issue is if you look at applicability, it's all around development or redevelopment. And so, and I would figure that's probably why it would sit in, or be touched by ComDev, since they're the ones that are really dealing with the initial aspects. And I guess my concern would be, and actually Chief Panino and I had a conversation earlier this week, similar to how there's the fire marshal that obviously owns the fire marshal process, but that can sometimes just create another just, middle person of kind of the process, and has certainly been an example of potentially leading to some inefficiencies when you've got so many different stakeholders that all have to then communicate with the applicant to make sure that their plans are all meeting our requirements. So I guess just help me understand how you envision that EPW would be working through the initial development process and doing it to improve our needs to address stormwater without creating any bottlenecks or any slowdowns to the process for applicants.
Go ahead, Brian, if you want to handle it. You can tackle it, or I can tackle it. Yeah, I think, Michael, I would argue that the exact inverse is happening. That this historical place where some things have been housed are actually creating more inefficiencies. We've got a project that has not known to you. The rest of the council is going to come out pretty soon. It's a perfect example where it got reviewed by ComDev. It did not storm EPW, who are the subject matter experts on stormwater. And by the way, this is going to be a larger and larger growing concern in our city, both on the private side and the public side. It is, no pun intended, a coming storm for our city. We have a project that just recently, in the last several months, came through the community development process, a gigantic project, and EPW was not taking the EPW to weigh in on the storm process. That to me is a problem. And that to me has to be rectified, because the subject matter experts on storm reside in EPW. And so I think our process has actually not served this. I would tell you that, I think that's why this is so important. The subject matter experts on storm, and this is going to get larger and larger and larger and larger, and they've got to weigh in, and you can't have any cracks in your bureaucracy, which is what's happened. And so this is saying, and you can't have people fighting over turf. You know what I mean? Like, we've been working on this. And this is one of those people who's like, the ultimate people need to make a decision and have responsibility for storm water issues needs to be the public works folks. And that needs to be clear throughout the entire bureaucracy in the government. And I'm telling you, we got one that's going to be coming to you soon, and you're not going to believe the scope of this project. And you're going to be absolutely astonished when you find out, like, wow, how did Public Works not weigh in on this from a storm perspective? So I think, I would argue just the opposite. I would argue that the danger has been, is keeping in ComDev, that sometimes there's some expertise there, but there's not the giant expertise that resides in Public Works. And I think that process has got to change.
Just to add to something that the mayor said, is that the stormwater plans reviewer, who currently is in ComDev, that position was reallocated to be under Environmental Public Works. The idea is that stormwater plans reviewer is still going to sit down there, still going to participate in all the community development meetings, still participate in all when residents are coming in or people are applying for permits. The idea, and most of the things that are coming through are pretty standard, pretty easy. But when things get, when they don't look right, when need an extra opinion, that person is going to be working with the stormwater experts within EPW to help, either come up with a solution that might be a little bit more appetizing to the resident, because sometimes there's a difference between what the developer wants and what is cost feasible for the resident. So the idea is not to create a silo. The idea is just to be able to have another conduit for EPW to support the overall process.
Thank you. And so I guess, just to help me understand from a process, is it documented that if council does approve all these changes, that the EPW team would be approving each and every stormwater for any development prior to it being able to get what it needs, whether that's going to council for approval or it's something that doesn't require council approval, in which case it's just them getting their permits? Is that something that's going to be absolutely built into the process?
Yeah, because one of the signature authorities is the stormwater plans reviewer. So if the stormwater plans reviewer falls within our EPW, then EPW would be signing off on that. Problem right now is that position is open, so we're hiring. So if anybody knows of anybody right now, but the idea is if Environmental Public Works is going to sign off on it, then the answer is yes to all those questions.
And again, so that whether it's prior to someone that has the zoning they need, in which case it's not coming to council, and for them to get their LVP or their building permits or whatever it might be, that's an example where the plan reviewer is approving and signing off, but also want to make sure if it's something where they are requesting a rezoning or any type of zoning application, that prior to that zoning application coming to council, that will have been reviewed and commented on and ultimately approved by the stormwater person. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, the duties of the stormwater plans reviewer is not changing. It's just falling under the direction of Environmental Public Works versus community development.
And to kind of just follow up on that, Mike, remember, it's also not just EPW that's being impacted, it's the entire process. So, like, this is kind of requiring that too many projects in the past have been siloed. I think you're concerned siloing. That's exactly what's happened in the past in the city. So this is part of the countermeasures to that from an organizational perspective of saying, okay, you got a project, you come in, part of a project management is, has police signed off on this? Has transportation signed off on this? Has fire signed off on this? Has EPW signed off on this? On and on and on and on it goes. And so that every department has real accountability and responsibility for every project. Whereas in just kind of the past, it's kind of been siloed underneath one department, and that department's kind of had responsibility, but transportation didn't have full accountability. EPW didn't have full accountability. This is part of transferring that responsibility, because it'd be kind of like saying on roads, well, transportation, you know what, it's going to be like taking out a ComDev, right? Because you'd say, hey, you don't want transportation decisions being made inside of ComDev. You want them being made outside of ComDev by the people who have the subject matter expertise. This is kind of the same thing.
Thank you. And then I guess just another concern with this being new to the EP, not for the expertise standpoint, but just from a process standpoint to the EPW department, is variances. And so that's where, and I'm actually not talking about variances on, a small property, low impact type development, but more of for larger type developments. I guess my concern would be around the variance process, because right here, basically with the current process, it is something where staff could just go ahead and grant a variance to stormwater management standards, which then ends up resulting in an issue affecting the neighbors and things like that. So I guess that's where I just have another concern on what would that process be on the variance process through this new way. So basically, why would a variance ever be granted for a large development?
I think it's just the opposite, Mike. I think doing this is putting greater onus on that not happening. I think kind of to your question, Mark, and your subject matter expertise in the ComDev piece and the zoning piece, like you have you're accustomed to that kind of process. What I would like for us to do is get less accustomed to that process. Like if there is a variance, it's a big deal.
Well, and that's
In other words, and it's not something that forgive me for saying that the staff or talent's going to say, all right, we got it. Like if there's the reason is kind of trying to take the silos out of it is so that this does come back to council to say, hey, we got a problem. Instead of, and I think, and we're going to be advised by the subject matter experts on storm. But I don't think you're going to see a lot of variances coming from the public works folks saying, hey, guys, we need to issue a variance on this. I think you're going to get just the opposite. I think the pushback is going to be very disciplined and very tough, kind of unlike, the process in the past is going to be, no, I would really highly advise against you guys giving a variance. That's just,
I'm on the exact same page. I'm just seeing if we're updating the language even around variances, then I'm wondering if we should be adding an update to even just give that, just really document that clarity, not only for EPW, but even just for the community, for them to feel comfortable that some large developer or development isn't going to be able to just get a variance after the fact through staff without to not follow the standards that we have. Because currently today,
would you like to make that as a suggestion, as a separate part outside of this piece?
well, so the problem is, because this goes through 2 readings, and so therefore, it requires, so if committee moves this forward today, it then goes to initiation, then goes to planning commission, then first reading, then second reading. And so if we're already updating the variance section language, I'm thinking that we should also be, taking care of it all at once.
Can I make a request?
Yeah.
Can you perhaps look at just the piece on the Public Works Authority, which is really what this is about?
That includes this part. So today, we're updating the variances part. Variances to the stormwater management standards outlined in section 12.5.2 shall be subject to the approval of the Environmental Public Works Department Director. And whereas it used to be, within engineering, within ComDev. So that's where I'm thinking, just if we're going to be cleaning up all this language and giving EPW that authority, that's where I feel like we should probably just be adding a sentence or something to that section just to give clarity for residents not to worry that a stormwater variance is just going to be occurring behind the scenes. And I'd even be supportive of if today we move forward to initiation, we move forward as is, but for EPW to come back on just a recommended added sentence to bring to that initiation.
Councilmember Beeson.
I feel like we're overcomplicating matters. The variances in this is only related to the stormwater management standards, which are clearly defined in our code. These are just engineers being able to go soup to nuts for just stormwater within a project of saying, all the way from implementation to long-term maintenance, how stormwater only is going to be impacted. The perspective that I had from being briefed by staff, right now it's almost a Venn diagram of ComDev oversees one portion, Public Works oversees one portion. There's a sliver that they kind of do the handoff within, but the problem is you never know what the left hand and the right hand are doing. When you're moving it into entirely one department, again, they can see soup to nuts in the development of how the stormwater management is going to be impacted. I don't think that it's a slippery slope of variances. We never had that language in there before, and I worry about opening the can of worms of just injecting language of how it should be interpreted, when really it's just saying this is who oversees the approvals of this process, and then eventually it goes to mayor and council. That's just my perspective, though.
Mayor Wilson.
Mike, can I just make a suggestion? Like, I hear what you're saying, and I think you're addressing a much larger issue. Why not just suggest separate and apart from this, like just separate from this piece? Because this is just about who owns, to me, this is just about who owns Storm. ComDev owns Storm, EPW owns Storm. That's all we're saying. Hey, we think EPW should own Storm. That's all this is about. But you're bringing in the variance question, which to me is like the UDC question. Why not suggest separate from this conversation hey, guys, I would like to advance the ideal that variances be, whatever your language is, that submit that as a separate piece. Because I would agree, why complicate this particular one? Because you got a much, to me, you're asking a much different question.
So the two aspects. One, though, if we support this tonight, we're actually making it easier to get a variance, because today it requires checks and balances that ComDev has to agree in supporting a variance and EPW has
No,
to support.
that's not true.
Yes, it is right here.
Well, that may be the case, but that's not what happens. I mean, Mike, you could be right. That could be the language, but I'm telling you, that's not what happens as a practical matter. Like, I'm keeping my mouth shut, because this is gonna, there's a disaster coming out on something that happened internally in the city, from my perspective, and it's exactly because that didn't happen.
Oh, and I fully agree with the thought process behind this. So I'm fully supportive of moving this over to EPW and giving that all these sole aspects. So I think we're actually completely on the same page. It's just that knowing the process to update this is an initiation, a first reading, a second reading, plus a planning commission. I wouldn't want to have us send in language to update the variance language to reduce the required oversight in the document, to then just go through that exact same process again. So my point is, we should either make all the changes except for 11 and leave 11 as is, or we should add some clarification just to give EPW and the residents guidance that even though we're taking away a check and balance, we're actually making it stronger, which I think we can do by having EPW add one sentence.
Councilmember Beeson.
Again, I think you're going down the rabbit hole of variances in a way that's more broadly interpreted. The way that this language is written here, and I say this as somebody who manages an engineering firm and deals with these contracts a lot, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, this is language that has to be in there, that it has to be a joint approval of the engineering director and the EPW director designee, because whoever from their department representatives is the PE or the engineer of record who is signing puts their stamp on the line the moment that they say that we approve a variance. If, say, one department in this situation, when it was still a joint approval, say EPW approved a variance that ComDev did not approve, that ComDev engineer's stamp, in this case their certification, their licensure, is still on the line if things go awry. If further down the road it fails, they get sued, that person who never gave the approval on that variance is still held to the same liability standards. The reason why this language is being cleaned up is because literally nowhere else in here will you ever have the ComDev director or engineering director from ComDev included in there. So why would they have the joint variance when they didn't have the engineer that approved it?
Mayor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I got to tell you, and I've been trying to keep my mouth shut. The reason this bad boy is being done or suggested and submitted to you is because exactly what you're suggesting is what happened. A project was in community development, had a heavy storm component to it, a gigantic storm component to it. Guess who didn't get advised? EPW. Guess who signed off on it? ComDev. And I'm telling you, when this community finds out about that project, because we're still working on this damn thing behind the scenes, when they find out, if this thing goes through, it is a colossal mistake from a storm perspective, from my opinion, from what little I've been taught over my friends here. And it's a perfect example where the system, as it's set up today, in ComDev, completely failed. And didn't even talk to Public Works. Public Works had no knowledge of what was going on. The stormwater experts in our city were talk about silos. So I'm going to tell you, I'm a little emotional about this because I know this project well, and I know that if everybody knew this project and saw what happened because of this, because storm did not fall under Public Works, you would be outraged. I'm telling you, you'd be outraged. You'd say, look, y'all gonna change this tomorrow. Please make stormwater go to the storm experts. That's really what this is about.
And I want to do that. So again, this is obviously news to me, so I don't know what you're talking about. But that being said, it sounds to me that what happened was someone in staff violated our UDC. So we have right here, it specifically says that if there was a variance to the stormwater management standards.
Not a variance. Was it a variance? It was. They were not consulted. Sorry to interrupt you. The experts were not consulted on the storm nature of the project. Gigantic project, right? It was all kept within ComDev. Instead of going and say, hey guys, you guys are subject matter experts on storm. What do you think didn't occur?
And that,
That's not a variance, by the way. It wasn't a variance.
and so again, I'm fully supportive of EPW taking over. That sounds like a major issue that needs to be addressed and there needs to be accountability for. But again, right here, if we, I don't want to reduce the strength of our code because mistakes were made in the past. I want to make sure, have a strong code and hold people accountable to that. And that's where I feel variances, and actually, it's not even I feel, I see, variances, we're making it easier because the way our code is written for a variance to the stormwater management standards, it requires 2 people to sign off on it, which I think is increased accountability. I think someone should have their job on the line if they're signing off on something they shouldn't be signing off on. And so by this reducing it is I feel going in the wrong direction, which again, I think can
But
be
Mike, they
remedied.
have the authority today. This is why I'm sorry to interrupt you. Right now, ComDev has the authority to sign off on storm management. That they don't have to consult Public Works. They do not have to consult EPW. They have the authority inside of that department. Now, we've made some management changes and some organizational changes, but the reality is ComDev has the authority internally in that organization and has for years and years and years, and has been making storm management decisions when the expertise is in Public Works.
I completely agree with you. I think we're talking about 2 different things. So when it comes to the stormwater management, there's so many places in here where there's the edits and the updates. I fully support all of them. The one thing I'm talking about is purely variances. So variances to the stormwater management standards currently requires both, and anybody that does not do both is violating it. But what you're referring to is stormwater management in general. Totally agree, should be EPW. All I'm saying is, in doing this, we should not be reducing the requirements on a variance unless we're adding a sentence to give clarity on what that thought process
But
is.
brother, every single project, public and private, literally, and this is one of the things, like, people are gonna learn a lot more about stormwater over the next 5 years, because I'm telling you, it's gonna become a larger and larger issue. Every single project has a significant storm component to it. Like, most people don't really recognize it, and the fact that it has been kind of, forgive me, siloed, one person working, i.e. from a storm management perspective inside of ComDev, has been, for me, a misallocation of resources, understanding that the implications of stormwater management are gigantic, right? And so you need your best people in relation to that, working on that, advising on that. Not issuing variances, but issuing advice and counsel on this is how you should manage that, right? This is where the expertise lies. It is in Public Works. It is not in ComDev. And what this is look, and I don't have no idea how other cities are, so I will apologize. I don't know how other cities currently do this. What I will say to you is that in our city, it's, from my perspective, it's a mistake for storm to be managed under ComDev. And that really was the genesis of this was, can we just please move storm management to Public Works? That's all this is about. Nothing else. It really has nothing else. I hear the issue of variances keep coming up. I think that's a different question than this. Because the issue of variances is not the issue at hand in terms of even the project that I'm aware of. Like, nobody made a mistake on issuing a variance that they didn't have the authority to do. The problem was, the system was, they weren't required to go to the subject matter expertise.
And what you're doing is you're fixing that issue so that issue will never happen again, which I love and I support. It's just we're causing a different issue that did not occur before, which is we're making it easier for somebody to do a variance to the stormwater management standards.
Let me get Councilman Northland waiting.
So I think we're all on the same path here. We're all on the same page. Everybody understands the intent of what this was brought for. But to move it along, Councilman Palermo, what do you think about 12.5.5C, dual signatures required for variance? That satisfy your...
So I'm just looking at section 11, so where's the 12.5.c that you're at? I have the online version. What's the packet page number?
It'd be packet page 79.
79?
If I may, before we go down this
70
rabbit hole.
and 80, yeah, 88.
Let me make sure, Councilmember Northland, were you finished, sir, or no?
We're doing research, that's fine.
Okay, Councilmember Beeson.
Again, to clarify, the variances in this, I realize that given Councilmember Palermo's experience with ComDev, variances is usually related to land use. Variances in this is very clearly instructed, section 12.5.2. Go back one page. There's exactly 11 items that could ever be given a variance on according to that scope. It's the design of the stormwater management system, the natural resources inventory, the better site design practices, and the stormwater quality runoff, stream channel protection, overbank. If you are going to have a singular engineer or department who is signing for the rest of that scope, why in the world would you give a second department the ability, who has no scope or ability to oversee it, and the rest of this language, because we're stripping it, the ability to be a dual signer on something they've never had oversight on previously in the project? I understand the concern with the use of the word variances because it's a fun, sexy word in ComDev, but in this situation, it has a very delineated scope that does not have cause for concern, and you want only the engineers who are on that project or have that purview or are signing on it to be able to approve those variances and not opening it to another person. That is a liability.
Councilmember Palermo.
Well, to be clear, actually, my preference was not to leave ComDev on there. My preference was for EPW to give a sentence giving clarity to the community on what their position on variances will be. But I think then let's work through either the 11 I'd want to hear from Brian, just to ensure. Basically, my goal is I don't want any risk of in the future, 10 years from now, when Brian and all of us are all retired from the city, that there's no chance of some staff member without public visibility, et cetera, lessens a stormwater requirement, in which case creates a bigger issue for the person that lives next to them. And so that's what I would just want something in there documented. So that's where I'm saying one of two things. Either we leave the wording the same and purely just section 11, or we have EPW add a sentence to show that would not happen, or we walk through each of those 11 situations and have basically Brian signing off that none of those could ever make stormwater not as high as they are. Or, as Councilman Northland had brought up, a dual signature. I'm looking to create more accountability on staff and for the residents to be comfortable knowing that there's a lot of stormwater issues that occur with development, and we all get the phone calls on them.
So,
Councilmember Northland.
Willie, with your permission, could Brian just maybe say something? Would that be okay? I don't want to interrupt you, but he was just about to say something. Okay.
All right. Just to clarify, the dual signature thing would be under EPW. So double signatures under EPW would not be splitting departments or anything.
So we had a deputy director of infrastructure and a director of public works as signatures. Would that satisfy?
can I just add?
I'm sorry, please,
one
go
thing?
ahead.
So-
I just got, forgive me, before we solutionaire, I think you have a response.
I do. I don't know if it's going to solve everything, but I do have a response. So so originally, I believe this section was actually added because originally EPW did have authority over stormwater. And in the past 10 years, it changed where that moved down to community development. And there's a history there. This, in 2020, the city adopted the Blue Book, or the Georgia Stormwater Management Manual. So what Councilmember Beeson was talking about in section 12.5.2, all this text comes from the Georgia Stormwater Management Manual. And if you can't, in your site, design something within it's actually 10, because the 11th one is the variance, but if you can't design it within that 10, then there is something pretty major. There's something pretty different about that site, and it's going to be very, very unique. So this is a very uncommon thing in the stormwater world. The site is laid out that it's not going to allow something here, so you would go through the process of looking at what that is. This is not a very common thing. Just want to let you know.
Mayor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Brian, can you address, Mike, can you address Councilmember Palermo's concerns like, he's asking, I think, a very practical question from his experience. He's got 8 years, right? And he's seen some things and said, hey, I didn't think that was supposed to happen, right? And a decision got made internally in the organization, and Mike's seen it happen several times, like, whoa, how did that happen? Like, how did that decision get made? And what Mike's kind of addressing that is like, well, I don't want that to happen like that. He's responsible as an elected representative of the people, right? You're responsible as a talent and staff person for the execution of the policies, right? But Mike's saying, I want to have a policy here, but I don't want that policy to get changed that's different than what I believe I'm responsible for in terms of the execution of. And sometimes I've experienced that, and I feel frustrated by that. So how would you address that? Because I know you and Sarah are talking about the overall big blue plan, right? Which makes sense. But Mike does have a relevant point, like, hey, 10 years from now, how is it that if Director Watson is not here, and it's Director Jones, or Assistant Director Jones, or whoever, right? And they get a plan, and they say, And this is what Mike's saying. It's like, I don't want to I want to make sure it stays within the purview of what we say we're doing. And I think that's kind of the genesis of the question, if you'll forgive me for saying that.
It's a good question. If somebody were to sign off on something that it could have been met, then they have violated, number one, they've already violated Roswell's UDC, but now they violated the Georgia Stormwater Management Manual. You have to show clearly that you cannot do the design in the constraints of the land. This is a very rare thing. In my 2.5 years here, I have not seen it. I have not seen it happen. So could it happen? Those are hypotheticals that I can't. If somebody violated this, then they should be held accountable. But you have to go through all these and show that that particular site cannot be developed and the stormwater management cannot be designed to fit on the site or to do the function that it's supposed to do.
Councilmember Palermo.
And so I think a good reason why Mr. Watson, I trust you so much and always looking out for the benefits of the Roswell residents, and you are a Roswell resident, so which fits in well, is you were giving your honest viewpoint, which is obviously legitimate and exactly what you've seen the last 2.5 years. The problem is it actually concerns me more now, and not because of you, but because of what the future could hold, because that's the exact discussion that would go, and we did have variances occurring on developments that could not fit and meet the needs because of a weird property shape or a weird topography, and them still wanting to get and build exactly what they want. And that's where I just think it's important to the public. We're showing if the property does not meet the needs, it means in reality you can't do your development. You're going to have to do something that's less intense. And that's why I just think it's really beneficial if we were to move this all forward and just EPW adds a one sentence to that section of 11 showing that they're not going to just be granting they're not going to be granting a variance that's going to decrease the impact of the requirements.
Mayor Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think sometimes this is where we get in trouble, Mike, is that this one is fairly straightforward, and that if it's your desire to submit an additional piece to this, it should be a separate and additional piece, because if we don't, we're going to screw this up. We're not going to move forward on it. We're going to get stuck on this. We're going to solutionary it, and we're going to water it down. Because the first piece that needs to happen, in my estimation, with all due respect, is we have to move the management of stormwater from community development to EPW. And that's really the first issue at hand. And what I'd like permission is for the committee and the body to say yes or no to that, right? And then address separately your concerns. But I don't want this to get killed in paralysis by analysis. And I'm a little concerned that might happen, because this was pretty simple in my mind. I think I'm not discounting your concerns. Please hear me. I just don't want to screw this up. This one should be, in my opinion, up, let's go, boom, next issue, right? So I just don't want to screw it up, and I think it's a healthy conversation.
Councilmember Palermo.
So, and again, because every single part of this I agree with except for section 11, which is one of the few, things, so I agree with everything else in there. Mr. Watson, our director, said that this is not something that happens, which is great. So if it's not something that happens,
I haven't seen it happen.
of course, yeah, it's not common.
In my design experience, I've never experienced where that has been needed.
Right, and which is fantastic.
I'm not saying that.
No, absolutely, and I apologize for misquoting you. My point is knowing that's the case of what you just said, a variance should be approved by mayor and council then, instead of being able to be done without a public thing, if it's something that is so rare and could be so negatively impactful. So that's another way to solve it. If it's a non-issue, then let's just give the comfort to residents and show that we're not reducing the level of a variance being needed, because that's my issue. If we pass this, number 11 is making it easier in the future for a variance to be granted.
Councilmember Hall.
Just to follow up on Councilmember Palermo's, if you read through the items, there is some subjectivity to them. It refers to the GSMM, the Blue Book, the manual. However, the person that is signing has subjectivity available to them. Now, it depends on the caliber of that person, whether that subjectivity is aligned with mayor and council and wanting to have the highest standards, or if they're in their subjectivity, they're like, we can have, it says 10% is what we need, but you know what, we can go with 8% because of this or that. And as I read through them, there's a lot of subjectivity that could possibly happen, and that may technically be legal because because of the way the language is in the GSMM, and even if they stamp it, they're not going to lose their license because it was their professional opinion, but their subjectivity wasn't in alignment with the general plan. That would be my concern.
Councilmember Beeson.
I agree wholeheartedly with the mayor that I feel like we're way overcomplicating something that should be incredibly simple. I would not even say just like no, but hell no in all caps that mayor and council should ever be approving if there should be a variance on a stormwater according to the Blue Book, unless magically you guys had a PE on your council that's willing to stamp and sign for it. The entire purpose of having a PE that oversees these is because every time they sign, which is why there's a signature required, that says that it's in my professional opinion that it meets these standards. If it does not meet those standards, not only can they be sued, they can be stripped of their licensure. We'll use it in the terms of a doctor. If there's a malpractice, you can lose your doctor or your medical license. They can lose their licensure if it fails. I don't want to vouch for, I mean, gosh, I just play an engineer on TV. I work with a bunch of them. It doesn't make me any decent at it. I'm not going to vouch for a project. None of us should be vouching for a project as to whether or not a variance should be allowed. In this situation, again, to reemphasize, a variance is not the variance that you would see in community development and zoning and land use. In any of those uses of the word, it is specific to the Blue Book, and that is up to an engineer's discretion as to if the variance should be permitted because they are about to vouch and sign for it. That is their licensure. If, say, for instance, they said they needed a variance and mayor and council said no, and they have to move forward with that project, either the project dies or they are going to have to sign something they are not comfortable with because the data doesn't match it. We are making something very complicated that I think we could very much easily move forward. If you are not comfortable with that language, I very much like the mayor's suggestion that we can make the motion, move forward with this item, and you can separately motion for that language to be added.
Further comments or questions? Councilmember Hall.
Just to follow up on Councilmember Beeson, I think we're saying the same thing. You're saying that there is some subjectivity and the person is not going to sign on something that they don't believe in. The point is that they have that latitude of subjectivity. Depending on who that engineer is, who's in that role that's going to stamp it, they may not necessarily, if it's Director Watson, he's completely in alignment with the residents, the mayor and council, and we can be...
There's no engineering standards that align with the mayor and council. It either does or it does not work. It's not politicized. It's not my general vibes about the density of the project. It's, does the project meet the stormwater standards, yes or no?
I think you're missing my point. My point is the Blue Book allows for subjectivity. it says that you can go outside of these rules. This is what we recommend. We recommend 10%, but if you think you can do 8%, that's great. Mayor and council may want the highest standards possible because of all the issues. So if that person stamps it, it's fine, 8%, I'm protecting my license, I did the best I could, that may not be the decision that mayor and council wants. That's my only point.
So in that case, then how is mayor and council going to be held accountable if something goes awry with the project? We're able to say that we feel good about the way the specs look, or we know the capacity of the pipes, like,
That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting that that you don't grant the variance, that you just build the project to the way it's supposed to be.
I think Roswell historically has been the city of no for many reasons, and this is just a testament in that very long storied history of ways that instead of trying to find a way to troubleshoot and be problem solvers, we try to find a problem for a solution.
All right, Councilmember Hall.
Just to follow up, and that's the forum to do that, because that's, at a mayor and council meeting, you would have the professionals and saying, it's supposed to be this. If we don't, it's supposed to be 10%. If we don't give them 8%, this project goes away. Here's the downside, here's the risks, here's the problems. That's the information that's presented to us, because we are not PEs, we are not engineers. We are policy makers, and we're carrying that out in the vision for the best city possible. So that's what we're talking about.
Mayor Wilson.
I really regret the fact that I'm going to ask a question that's going to perpetuate this conversation. Particularly since I don't know where it lands. Well, I don't know where this question is going to land. Brian, I'm sorry to be a mystery, but you're familiar with the project that I'm talking about. I do not want to make this project public at this time. That was signed off by a professional engineer, was it not?
From the city or from the,
From both.
I haven't seen the permit, but it was definitely signed off by the engineer of record.
And so the engineer of record was making a professional judgment about the stormwater management of that particular project. Correct? And the engineer of record had the expertise and the qualifications to make that judgment, correct? And as a layperson, who's also an elected representative for the city, having looked at that project, I'm saying that that professional person, in my estimation, made a very poor judgment in regards to stormwater management. Okay? And I'm not an expert. I'm not the expert. And I think that some of that has been shared by some other people who are professionals and have knowledge. And so I don't know and I don't know how to land this, but it's a perfect example, like somebody smart, somebody know what they're doing, but boy, it sure didn't align with what I think the city wants. I don't think it, in my personal judgment, I don't think that aligns with what the city wants from a storm management perspective. And so what I thought we were solving for was, well, let's put that, did that happen because there was not adequate storm management understanding and expertise? Because that's really what I thought we were solving for, right? I thought we were solving for is the fact that some of that decision-making that was made in that project came from the apparatus, and that maybe the apparatus, the professional people involved, although smart and dealing with stormwater management, were not the subject matter experts. But maybe I'm wrong about this, because I don't want to, because they've been making stormwater decisions, right? And one of the things, the stories that our city's going to find out is the city of Roswell has a lot of 30 and 40 and 50-year-old private developments, right, where there was not adequate storm management resources put into the development of that project. And so we're going to see a lot of neighborhoods, private neighborhoods, responsible for their private storm, are going to be saying, oh my gosh, I have a $70,000 problem in the back of my yard. Oh my gosh, I got a $120,000 problem in the front of my yard. Help. And what governments say across the United States, particularly the municipal level, is that's a private development. You're responsible for that. And one of the things we've been working on as a city is to say, can we be smarter than this problem? Because we understand that, particularly in the city of Roswell, we're gonna have a lot of 30 and 40 and 50-year-old projects that our residents are gonna be struggling with in the next 5 to 10 years. They're gonna start manifesting themselves on private storm issues. And we have the same problem from a public storm issue. And you've seen in the last 18 months how we have stepped up the resources, understanding that this is going to be a growing issue and that we have a growing responsibility to address it on the public side, but also on the private side. And so while we're discussing this, and everybody says, "What the heck are you talking about?" This is really kind of regarded primarily to private development for the most part. And is there adequate storm management to address the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, and 50 years? And obviously, there's a lot of subject matter expertise that goes into that. And I think Sarah's addressing that a little bit. But I'm addressing is, Sarah, that's why I hesitate to bring this up. This was done by smart, credentialed people who knew what they were doing. And they made the wrong decision for the city of Roswell. And so this is a problem. That's what I'm saying. I don't know where this lays. I don't think it's going where you're going, Mike. I don't. I don't think, forgive me with all due respect, I don't think where you're going on this is the right answer. But Sarah, I got to tell you, some of these smart people who are involved in this particular project, they didn't make the right decision.
Right, but that wouldn't, to your point, it was not a variance that led to that project.
That's correct.
So the
You're correct.
entire language that we're hashing out over, like,
Agreed.
gosh, an hour would never even be applicable in that instance.
Absolutely agreed. And to your point, I thought we were solving for this by putting the subject matter expertise in the right department. Mike's saying, that's cool, man, but it kind of scares me because I've seen in the past where the city internally, right, has made some decisions like, hey, you don't get to make that decision, Sarah. You don't get to make that decision, Lee. We're going to make it down here in the hole because we know better. Because you know what? We are smarter and more credentialed. We do this more often. And Mike's saying, well, that's cool, but you know what? That's not what my city wants. So I think it's a legitimate problem. But I would say, Mike, going back to this is, can we just solve for this one problem?
Councilmember Palermo.
So I am going to go back to the original thing, which is a one sentence, which I think does get us there. But Mayor Wilson, thank you for bringing all that up because that's absolutely what I've seen in ComDev for 8 years, is that you'll certainly have the person that has been deemed an expert, and ultimately they do something that's not best for the city, not best for the neighbors, not best for the residents. And thank you to Councilmember Hall for bringing up the subjectivity, because that is, of course, what we've seen and where we get the real threats and the issues. But it goes back to, here's really my intent, the one sentence of my intent. And if we agree on this, then I think this is a way that totally solves it. Because again, I'm supportive of getting the expertise in the right place. I'm supportive of everything. I'm not supportive of reducing the strength of the variance or the just what a big deal a variance is. So the one sentence that basically I would like to accomplish, that I wanted EPW to think of, was basically something along the lines of a variance that reduces the quality or effectiveness of stormwater management will not be granted, something along those lines. So in other words, they're not going to grant a variance just, in their own office if it's going to reduce the quality or the effectiveness.
Mayor Wilson.
Mike, I hear where you're going, but the problem is the person on this project we're arguing, that I have in my head, they would argue, oh, I improved the stormwater piece. And I would say, I would argue as a layperson and somebody using other professional people, I disagree with you. I don't think you solved for the stormwater. But they would say, no, actually, my stormwater plan's better. I'm actually better than the Blue Book. That's probably what they would say. Yeah.
With that though, I think two things though. One, it would accomplish the goal of getting it with the actual experts. So probably a group that you would have at least hopefully a little more confidence that they'd be accurate, because it's the group that are the experts on the stormwater. And number two, the purpose of it is, what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to increase accountability. I feel when a staff member, and again, I don't know why I said I feel, when a staff member is making a decision and granting a variance and making something easier for something to build, for someone to build something potentially more intense for the property or other details, that's, to me, that's a lack of accountability because they're not doing that in the public eye. So my point is, at least if we're gonna all agree, you know what, this one person should be able to grant a variance without any public oversight, let's at least have a sentence that ties to them. They're not gonna be granting a variance if they're required to do something meeting 10%, they're not gonna be able to say, go down to 8% and just say it's close enough.
Mayor Wilson.
Can I throw an ideal out? Can we just be honest? This is all about leadership. And so what we're talking about are 20 years of where the leadership in the city didn't have clarity. We're talking about where there was 20 years of mixed signals. We're talking about 20 years of fighting internally, fighting between the staff and the talent in the city and the elected officials, and the elected officials running the bus over the staff and the talent, and on and on and on. And the truth of the matter is, there's going to be a great story coming out in AJC tomorrow. It's going to be about yours truly. Transparency, yak. The reality is that how it's tyrannical mayor, and, you know, how it's impossible for anybody to work here, they can't stand it, yada, all this silliness. Because the reality is that under our leadership, and under the leadership of Mr. Knighton, and under the leadership of the COO, and underneath the leadership of the people around us, we are creating clarity about execution, clarity about policy, clarity about goals and visions, clarity about results, and a lot of good things are happening internally. And the truth of the matter is if you want to change an organization, this is the best way to change your organization. You create so many rules that nobody knows what the heck's going on, right? And I think that's part of the problem. And I would say to you, a little pushback. It was something said a few minutes ago, like, we can sometimes create our own problems by trying to solutionary and solve every problem, rather than the reality is it's about human beings and how you interact with one another and how you engage with one another and how much clarity there is about what needs to be done and what doesn't need to be done. And the reality is, look, you know me, I'm not that smart. We talk pretty frankly. We're working on community development. Reality is that we got some reorganization. We got some things going on there. We're going through some pain points. We're going to go through some pain points. It's good. It's good for the organization. And I think the people of Roswell, the residents of Roswell, the businesses of Roswell are going to see more and more positive results as time matriculates. But I get a little scared sometimes when we try to, look guys, you know this, our book of ordinances, it's easily 50% too large because we keep trying to solve for problems, for behavior, right, and action between human beings rather than having clarity of what it is we're trying to get done and being clear with one another and communicating with another and having the ability to get that done. I just think sometimes I'm a little leery of putting too much ornate structure in everything. That's one of the problems I have with our government, right? Trying to solve everything through words in paper rather than human beings interacting with one another.
All right. Further questions or comments at the moment?
Where'd Sarah go?
She's stepped out for a moment. I will, I've patiently waited. But I do want to address one thing because I think it's important and relevant for the conversation. Not specifically the language here, obviously it's Mayor and Council's determination. But the Reinvent Roswell initiative that we have currently is to dismantle silos, is to create more enhanced communication, cross-collaboration, and coordination among staff units and departments. And everything that we're doing now in terms of restructuring, reorganization, and also taking a look at the apparatus of the organization, how we move, how we can identify areas that we need to shore up that are deficient, and be able to identify those quickly and be able to make some changes and modifications. I think over the next 8 to 12 months, we'll see some tangible results as a result. We'll see some tangible evidence of that. I think it's important to understand also is the leadership dynamic that is currently taking place within the city and some reorganization that we're doing. It is to create strategic thinking throughout the organization and the capacity to be able to address issues collaboratively and ensure that some of the things that we've seen in the past don't happen in the future. And that's very important to know. Staff has been working very, very hard on some of these issues. One bucket is policies and procedures, to identify all the policies and procedures that we have, where we have some conflicts, where we have some policy and procedures that don't meet the vision of the mayor and council, to be able to identify those and to dismantle those and to ensure that we have policies and procedures going forward that meet the vision of mayor and council and rightfully take authorities from staff in certain areas and place them where they belong with policymakers. And so that's just one example of things that we're taking a look at throughout the organization right now. And one of the things related to this issue specifically that I'll address is for one entity to take ownership and accountability in one entity, be it stormwater in this case was the recommendation. Obviously, the questions that have been raised and points that have been raised are very valid and warrant, obviously consideration by mayor and council. And so I just wanted to mention the intense amount of work that's being done right now to be able to turn the organization in a manner that is commensurate with the vision of mayor and council and to be able to affect change, efficiency, effectiveness, and service to the residents of Roswell, meeting with the vision of the mayor and council. It's an intense undertaking, and I want to underscore that. It's an intense undertaking for staff, but we are committed to it, and we've made some tangible steps over the last couple of months, and we'll continue to do so over the course of the next year, ensuring that mayor and council are engaged and understand what that looks like for your ultimate approval and endorsement. So with that, any further questions or comments?
So the question at hand is to move this forward as is, and then do you want to go back and add something extra to it tonight, or is that for next committee meeting, or how does that work?
Given that the next item I think is actually going to be the longer item with more debate, part of me is wanting to just get through this one, but ultimately, obviously my preference is we don't go through an initiation, first reading, second reading, to then just go through an initiation, first reading, second reading on one excerpt from it. So my preference is either it's just as is tonight, or it's as is with some kind of update to show that whoever is in Director Watson's role in the future is going to know that they should not be reducing our standards.
Councilmember Hall.
Do we need to, can we strike item 11 altogether? Why do we have to have variances?
That is a great question.
Councilmember Hills.
Protocol, is it possible to move this forward and have a sidecar? That's not the right term, but to have a second item and then we bring that back and address what you're trying to accomplish there, Councilmember Palermo, maybe not in tandem, but in the same time frame here. If we've gone years without this being an issue, could we move that separately, quickly along, even if it's out of order at committee or council?
So the only problem is we'll have to initiate any item that we do, we'll have to advertise, we'll have to send to the planning commission, and we'll have to go to a first reading, a second reading, so that's what we'd have to do.
Not necessarily. I mean, can't we just have the mayor made an excellent point about an hour ago. The mayor made an excellent point saying we can motion this through and then you can make an additional motion to do whatever you want with the language on 11. It would just be a separate line item.
Since this is spawned from this item, does that have to be advertised again? Forgive my ignorance on the protocol.
So the question is, would it have to be advertised again if you're adding something to it at the next meeting?
As a separate item.
Michael, can I interrupt you? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, by the way, thank you for your comments earlier. So what I would suggest is, very simply, I'm advocating passing this as it is tonight, and then come back and Mike says, hey, look, I would like to create a new item off of what you just passed separately as another new item. I want to create a new item. Mike says, I want to create a new item. I want to get rid of 11 or amend it or whatever it is, right? I don't know, I'm not suggesting what that is. But pass this, and then right behind it, as a separate item, come and say, I would like to do such and such. And then whatever that goes, you know what I'm saying? And they both got to go through this process. Does that make sense? So if you pass this, it does not preclude a separate item being considered and passed and considered. Does that make any sense? Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes, that was the whole question around advertising and whatnot. If this spawns off, do we have to turn around and redo the second reading? So, no, I'm totally fine pushing this on as is.
Councilmember Hall.
I would just like Brian to be able to answer the question. If we were to strike number 11, since in your time, there have never been any variances, in the future, would that be a problem for us?
My recommendation is that you do not strike the variance section, because that's meaning 100% of the time that every site that is going to be developed on stormwater management practices are going to be able to be handled. And I cannot say that unequivocally. Sorry.
Councilmember Palermo.
And I feel, again, knowing I'm obviously passionate about this item, given I was getting a call from an upset resident on the way here, one that I don't know, I've never met or anything like that. I do feel anybody that wants to develop in Roswell should be meeting our stormwater requirements and not creating a burden for neighbors.
Further comments, questions?
Motion to move this on.
All right. We have a motion by Councilmember Northland to move this item forward as is. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, sir.
Second by Councilmember Beeson. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? We have 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. All opposed, and 2 opposed. All right, this item will move forward currently as is. All right, thank you very much. The final item that we have for Public Safety and Public Works Committee meeting this evening, item number 6, is consideration to approve budget amendment to accept.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
may I interrupt, sir?
Yes.
Does, at this time, would the body like to consider a separate item to the item we just considered? You want to make a new submission?
Thank you for the clarification, Mayor.
No, I'm sorry, Mr.
No,
Chairman.
it's fine. All right, yes.
Does the body want to suggest a new item?
Councilmember Palermo. Excuse me. Councilmember Palermo.
What I'd prefer to do is even give EPW an opportunity to think. They will certainly listen to this discussion, and knowing that this is going to be coming to initiation at the next council meeting, if EPW has any suggestions to resolve the concerns and the issues, then I think that's great. But ultimately, this whole document is going to be going through an initiation, the Planning Commission, first reading and second reading. So I don't think there's the need right now. I just want to make sure that we don't have any future individual in EPW and any future mayor and council that's enabling the opportunity for new developments not to meet stormwater requirements.
Thank you. Mayor Wilson.
Mike, this is where we get in trouble, man, as a city. Like, this is like, if you got something you want to do it separately. Don't kill the baby with the bathwater. I just heard a kill the baby with the bathwater statement. Like, we're about to put this bad boy through massive administrative and political minutia. We're going to get everybody all excited. This is a simple piece. Stormwater goes from ComDev to Public Works. Wait, hold on a second, Christine. That's all this is. And we're making this complete. If you want to have a discussion, and that's why I just offered up, have a different discussion. And, you know, it sounds like you want to address the zoning code. I'm all for it. Let's address the zoning code. But don't screw this up. Like, I'm telling you, right now, every day the city goes forward where storm is inside of ComDev, we're opening up. Each one of us are responsible for the potential of a stormwater issue that's not being managed, in my opinion, the best way. And the best way is for the subject matter experts to have control, ultimate control over stormwater management. That's Public Works, not ComDev. So every day we delay this, every day we don't allow this policy to go forward, you and I, my friend, are making a mistake. Now, if you want to add something to that and change it differently, do it. But please don't shred up the works on this. Because that's what we do. We got to stop that. That's not healthy for the city, and it's complicating the argument. It's making people think this is something. Like, if the issue is control, I hear you. Let's talk about it. But don't confuse that issue that we just talked about and run it through the meat grinder and have it turn into a political debate. This shouldn't be a political debate. There's nobody here that should have any different opinion unless, you know what, I'm for ComDev versus Public Works. I think ComDev should own stormwater. Okay, why? That's a fair question, right? Well, I think Public Works should own stormwater. That's the only debate at hand. If you want to separate the issue, and now's the time to address it. But please don't grind this bad boy up.
Councilmember Palermo?
And so with that, in this document, there's probably about 10 sections that are updated. And 9 of those sections are purely just taking it from ComDev to EPW. I agree with all 9 of those sections and all 9 of those updates. The one part that I have the concern with is this is making it easier to have a variance in the future, and I don't support making it easier for a variance. So that's where I said I think there's 3 different ways to solve it. One way is we remove the variance section, say, you know what, you just can't grant a variance, that solves it. Number 2, we keep it as is, just that one section status quo. The only way a variance can be granted is if it's signed off by 2 departments, so 2 departments are now held accountable. Or 3, we add a sentence just to show the intent of EPW that they're not going to be giving a variance that they feel could be in any way justified, making it easier. So those are 3 ways to solve it, but that's where it is. That's where the one disagreement area is.
Councilmember Hall?
I agreed, and I think I was one of the early advocators that that storm needed to be in EPW and not ComDev from just my years of experience. This is the only part that just needs some modification. I mean, I'm all for moving it to EPW. That's where it needs to live, with the professionals.
Okay. Councilmember Beeson?
To the mayor's point, though, it's a point of frustration for me when we go through the entirety of committee and everyone says either we could skin a cat 3 ways or I'm fine with it, and then we get to the dais and we're in a meeting for 4 some odd hours because instead of solving for X or making the sausage or skinning the cat in the committee, we wait until we get on the dais and it holds up the whole process. If there's a way that you guys want to make a motion in your minds that you want to improve the language, wouldn't this be the time and place?
I'm going to do, forgive me, if I'm going to make, Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I'm going to make an assumption on what the motion you want is. I'm going to make the motion on what you think. So I like the motion, Michelle, help me out on that, let me screw this up. So everything we just discussed, this is a new one, so the other one's already done, right? But we're going to eliminate number 11 on section, forgive me. 12.5.2. Yep, 12.5.2, number 11, eliminate that. That's the matter before the body. Is that fair? I make a motion that's what, because I think that's what you want, right? I'm making a motion, that's what we do.
All right, mayor's made a motion. We have a second.
I'll second that.
Second by Councilmember Palermo.
And this will go to, by the way, this will go to Planning Commission. This will go to whatever else can we meat grind this?
Let's form a new committee for it.
Suggesting or
Right.
the actual.
Point of clarification from the.
City Attorney?
Yeah, if I, just to be clear, are you wanting to eliminate the entirety of number 11 or just the changes that are being proposed?
Number 11, eliminate.
So you're not going to have any variances to
That's correct.
stormwater at all?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Watson, do you have any examples you've seen where there's actually been a variance and you feel that's something that would align with the goals of the residents of Roswell and this mayor and council?
That's a tough question to answer there, sir. what I would point everybody to is section 12.5.5, which is variances and appeals, which those two things would probably cover anything. So if somebody was coming in and wanting to get a permit and they were not able to meet section 12.5.2 and their permit was denied, then they could appeal it. So it would fall under there.
So, Mr. Chairman? So Brian, thanks. Talk me through this, so I say make the correct, so you're saying 12.5.211 is not the correct, based upon hearing this conversation. What's the correct one? Just eliminate 12.5.5?
No, based on what I'm hearing, this is what I'm hearing is
BZA will be busier based on what you're hearing.
the recommendation is to eliminate 12.5.2.
11.
Point A, point 11.
That's correct.
And which is fine. What I would, I would say that would be fine, but if you do that, vote on it, approve it, and down the road, somebody comes in and they have a permit and they're not able to meet any portion of section 12.5, not just 12.5.2, but any section, they're able to appeal that denial. So I just want to point that out because there's two places in here where you can get a variance. One is. That's right. Correct.
Yeah, so you know the intent. You know the intent.
I know the
So-
intent. I think the intent before was to make sure that Environmental Public Works signed off on it. This is why this section was added. And so now we're kind of going back to the way that it was. And if the intent, the goal is to have two different signatures on it, I think there's different ways that you can do that. I don't know if I would recommend two different departments, because now you're asking a department, to what Councilmember Beeson was saying, you're asking a department or somebody who hasn't been involved in the project.
No, Brian, forgive me interrupting. I don't hear that as the intent. The intent is to eliminate variances being made at the staff level. That's the intent, correct?
The intent is if someone's going to do a new development here, they meet our stormwater requirements and don't create a burden on their neighbors.
Okay. Then if you're eliminating 12.5.2, point A, point 11,
Successfully, that's successful in terms of the intent. I want to make sure, Mike, that's right. What you're trying to do is eliminate variances on stormwater management at the staff level, that it should go sitting to council and mayor, correct? The council,
That works for me. Again, as I mentioned, I just don't want to make it easier, so.
correct?
The appeal, how the appeal goes to the BZA. Someone could appeal if they did not meet the criteria.
I think maybe,
They could appeal to the BZA.
and this is your decision, but I think, because I've heard you say a few different things, and I would say I think the intent is if there is a variance, that mayor and council want to know about it.
It'd be presented to mayor and council publicly.
That
You're not-
sounds
you're-
more like what the intent is.
Yes.
So I would almost say that if a variance in this, from what you're saying, is if there is a variance that for some reason the design engineer cannot fit within this, that variance would need to come to mayor and council.
How about just say that in number 11, 12.5.2A11, variances to stormwater management standards outlined in section 12.52 shall be subject to the approval of mayor and council. How about that? Would that be satisfactory?
I think that, whether or not.
That's the
That's
ultimate.
what I'm hearing.
That's what I'm hearing too. That's the ultimate drop, right? So variance, you say that, there says, can you say that, Michael?
I think
Yeah, we're just
that's
looking
okay.
at-
We're just looking at the
there
appeal
may be another
section.
change that
The
you're gonna
appeal
have to
section
make.
would need to be modified to take it from the BZA.
But that's what you're after, right?
Yeah, that basically, if his recommendation is we give a variance right here, he presents that to mayor and council, and mayor and council says, yep, we'll give that variance, or no, we're not going to do that.
Or having two engineers sign it.
Don't do that.
Councilmember Morthman. Councilmember Morthman.
So back to our original discussion about this, two signatures within the same department, does that not work? Does that not get it done?
I hear Mike's, I'm, Mike, and I don't want to interpret you, but I hear what Mike's saying. Mike's saying, no, ultimately, he wants variances to be signed off by mayor and council on stormwater management. So, not two signatures. He's saying very clearly, ultimately, if there's a variance on stormwater management, it has to be approved by mayor and council. That's what you're saying.
I think that makes it the ideal way. So 2 signatures, in my mind, keeps it the way it is, which means we're not lessening it. But doing it that way, where it's not Mr. Watson just doing it downstairs and nobody knows about it, but instead him granting a variance, presents that to mayor and council. Mayor and council either supports or does not support it. I think that's an ideal. It's all about just how do we increase the public process when someone's not willing to meet the requirements that we have.
Councilmember Beeson.
This goes back to kind of something that came before mayor and council a while ago. It's not that someone's willingly looking at a project and being like, you know what? I don't want to do the blue book. Let's do something completely different. And it's not that they don't want to take care of their stormwater. It's that in this case, I'll just pull one random out of there. The topo minimum 2-foot contours really was going to be a 1.99-foot contour. In this case, that would still be a variance. It doesn't mean that it's going to fail the stormwater system. In this case, not a single person up on this side of the room could look at any variance and be like, looks good, my guy, hit it. None of us. And I say, I have an entire master's degree in environmental management. I work in engineering every day. I could not do that. And I think it puts a burden and a risk on the city when you politicize something that is inherently non-political, when you send it to an elected official. I did like Councilmember Morthland's recommendation earlier that if you want 2 signatories on it because you want someone to check their work, I like having the deputy director and the director be the signatories on it as your insurance in this case. But this doesn't need to be a mayor and council scenario in my mind.
Mayor Wilson.
I hesitate when you guys draw me in, both of you.
We just bait you for the
You do bait me.
And again, we're not even the big item. The next item is going to be the one that takes a while.
No, it's not. No, it's not. So, this is a perfect example. So I think, you can make a very credible stormwater plan that is compliant with Big Blue. And for example, it may say, and this is where you as an elected official and as a resident say, oh, hell no, right? Say, you know what, I got a stormwater plan, but instead of moving dirt on side of a large-scale project and moving internally and finding stormwater solutions on the project, I'm gonna remove dirt, and I'm gonna put, let's say, 7,500 truckloads of dirt up and down your roads. Now, completely acceptable in terms of stormwater management. And to your point, do I have the qualification to disagree with it? I absolutely do not. But I do have the qualification to say, no, I don't want 7,500 truckloads of dirt up and down my neighborhood road. As a matter of fact, the onus is, the reason you're doing that is because somebody made a cost decision, right, as guided by the developer to the engineer, saying, find me the cheapest solution, still fitting within the stormwater plan. And they did, and they can, and they will, because money always, right, at the end, ultimately usually drives most of these decisions, as long as it's compliant. But a perfect example is that you and I as residents and as elected officials say, yeah, you know what? You're gonna have to spend more money because that affects the quality of life of my community. That affects the cost that the taxpayers have to spend on, for example, the roads. But it got shutted off from the private side to the public side, but it met the stormwater plan. Perfect example where this is like, one of the challenges is, it's not so just necessarily, hey, a professional is the best person, because guess what? A professional is being guided by somebody's financial criteria, particularly in terms of private development. And there are different ways to slice that cat, quite frankly. And a perfect example is sometimes, the professional people say, you know what, we'll accept the plan for you to take the product up and down our street. That's an acceptable plan. It meets the guidelines of Big Blue. We're okay. What we would say as public officials and we'd say as residents, time out, not cool. Find another plan. So that's why I would say, I do think, Sarah, you would say sometimes you may not have the professional degree or an expertise to disagree with their plan, but just say, that's a no-go.
You're making the assumption in that situation that that's the variance. That would also imply
No, I'm not
that the
talking about
non-variance would not involve a dozen truckloads of dirt going up and down roads.
So you and I are not, I'm not talking about variance. I'm talking about, what I'm addressing is saying that I can't weigh in on a decision because a professional degreed person has done the work. See, that's something I kind of challenge a little bit, kind of like I'm challenging Michael a little bit on this. I challenge, like, just because a professional degreed person has made a decision in their discipline, I'm not allowed to challenge that decision. I may not have the expertise to weigh in on the decision and say, hey, you're wrong about that. But I can say, that does not fit. That doesn't work. Your solution that you came up with, it did meet stormwater management criteria. You're good. But guess what? It doesn't work for the community.
But in that case, if it meets Blue Book, we would still not see it as mayor and council. It would just get approved. So it's a null and void example.
And, well, the reason that example is so relevant is because the whole reason this thing is before you, the past issue that you now promoted forward, is because that's exactly what community development did. What I'm suggesting to you is that the stormwater management experts would say with greater scrutiny, that's not cool. You know what? It does pass the smell test. In other words, it's acceptable to Big Blue, but we know, because we're in the stormwater management business, both from a public and private side, that's not going to pass our long-term standards. Like, we got to be more creative to that. Whereas I think that's why I said, please get this out of ComDev and get it to Public Works. Because to the point is, higher scrutiny levels, higher expectations of, hey, you guys are stormwater professionals. Don't just simply take the first thing that passes the smell test. And that's what happened on this project. It passed the smell test. It's acceptable. It's got stormwater, it meets some stormwater management guidelines. But I would say underneath the leadership of Mr. Knighton and the team, they would say, and by the way, this goes back to overall project management, you know what? If there's 7,500 truckloads going up and down the street, even though it meets stormwater management criteria, doesn't meet other criteria. And that's one of the problems of saying, for me, from a project management perspective, is getting the right people signing off on the decisions. For example, the transportation director, are you signing off on 7,500 truckloads going up and down the street of dirt? I don't think you are. If you are, because you're paying for it, the residents are going to pay for it. By the way, hey, Brian, why'd you sign off on that? Because the problem that's why I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying the problem was siloed back to one department was making too many decisions for too many departments, right? To your point. And if Brian signed off on that as the head of Public Works, right? I'd say, Brian, why are you signing off on something that was a least cost-driven directive from the developer? Yeah, he should have spent $2 million more and come up with a better solution for the community at large, right? Just because, don't meet minimum standards. And I think, to your point, when you throw a lot of standards and stuff, sometimes it's overwhelming, intimidating, like it looks fantastic. And the reality is, you know this better than anybody, it's minimum standards, right? It's not the best you can do. Anyway, I got lost in what the heck I'm talking about. Motion it. This is the Mike Palermo motion. Mayor and council has ultimate authority on any variance on stormwater project. Write that in however you want to write it in.
Okay.
Yeah, could you leave that open so that we can review it and make whatever changes to effectuate that?
That's good by me, if it's okay by Councilmember Palermo.
It is, because I was actually going to say, I'd really want EPW drafting it, and as a drafting it, really thinking about, is there anything that should be an exception? What comes to mind for me is there shouldn't be any exceptions, but is there potentially EPW might know, well, here's an exception, this is what it can impact. I'm going to guess it's pretty limited at the fact that in 2.5 years, we haven't had one. But yes, that meets the intent, and I certainly support that, knowing that EPW would have some time to improve the language. It would go to initiation, it would go to planning commission. I'm sure they'd completely rewrite it and have some great ideas. And then it will come for a first reading, second reading.
So a motion made by Councilmember Palermo, is that right, Mr. Chairman? Or a motion made by me?
by the mayor.
Yes, sir.
Motion made by the mayor, and I believe seconded by Councilmember Palermo. Is that correct? Seconded by Councilmember Palermo. Any further discussion? All in favor? All in favor?
I'll vote for this.
All opposed? All right, one opposed. Okay. All right, and so with,
So,
we're going to bring it all together.
to initiation, it comes as one, two things,
There's two separate items, completely two separate items. Yes, sir.
We address it accordingly. It's two separate items. All right. All right. Final item on this committee agenda.
So here's the issue. I typed up all these notes. I didn't hit save and my battery went on, so I don't have all my notes to talk about during this one.
Item number 6, consideration to approve budget amendment to accept Georgia Association of Department of Public Section 319H non-point source implementation grant program for $150,000. Mr. Watson.
Thank you, sir, very much. So this item is requesting approval of a budget amendment to accept $150,000 from EPD for a Section 319 non-point source implementation grant. The grant, sorry about that. The grant originally required a 60-40 match. So we had $100,000 from EPW, and we were asking for $100,000 from the state. The state reviewed the proposal, really liked it, and actually added money to our proposal because they thought it would actually be a benefit to the Georgia Stormwater Management Manual. The project that we had submitted on in one was actually to install 6 bioslopes within City Hall parking lot. So it's not going to impact any of the parking. These are going to be in the medians that going down the center stairwell of the parking lot and about 15 to 20 feet off of each of those landings, and installing bioslopes and being able to monitor and have different parameters that we set up for each one of those so that we can assess which one would be the best bioslope. This will not only benefit Environmental Public Works, but RDOT will also be able to use this as BMPs along many of their projects that they have throughout the city. Take any questions.
Questions? Mayor Wilson?
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Brian, just want to say one quick thing. Congratulations on being the new Director of Public Works. Failed to say that through this whole conversation. Thank you, congratulations. We appreciate everything you're doing, and this is a great grant. Thanks for getting it done.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Palermo.
Exciting about the grant and being more than you expected, so that's great. Obviously, if it's good for stormwater, then I'm a big fan, good for the environment. I do have a layman's question. So help me understand what the bioslope would be like. What does it look like if you're walking on it, you're walking next to it, whatnot?
Yeah, you normally would not walk on it, but are you familiar with an infiltration trench?
Not completely.
Okay, then, so imagine like a French drain. Where
Yep.
you would dig a hole and you would have media or rock that would allow water to infiltrate in.
Yep.
Typically, an infiltration trench will be level. A bioslope would be on a slope, so that on a sloped area, usually it's grassed or where we have pine straw. And so as water is running over it, you change the media so that it allows infiltration of water through that and not running off, continuing to run off to each parking lot. So it's basically an infiltration practice.
Awesome. And then, so of those medians, where that's where the slopes are going to be, what percentage of these medians is it taking up? Is it 100% of the medians?
No, sir. So it's just where the yellow areas are. The
Oh,
yellow
okay.
boxes. Sorry.
Yep.
So it's about 15 to 20 feet. We haven't gone through design at all, but we would want to maximize what we could with the dollars that we have. And so it would just be these little areas on each side. So there'd be 6 of them. And what makes it a nice project is because we can infiltrate water there, and our storm drain is right along the steps that go down, we can actually catch the water going into the storm drain. So we actually can measure water coming in, water going out, the quality of it. So it gives us a good indication of how effective these practices are. And we can do different things with them. So.
Excellent.
Councilmember Hall?
Just a question or clarification that these will not impact the sidewalks that are going in there and any of the trails, the trail system that is going to Smith Plantation and City Hall.
That is correct. It will not impact any sidewalks, trails, or any of the parking area. The only areas of parking that would have modifications, but it will not impede a vehicle from parking there, is just on the upside, and on the map here, on the left-hand side of each of these
yellow boxes. There will be some sort of probably a diverter to get water over or curb cut to get water into the practice. So that would be the only modification, but it's not going to impede parking.
All right, any further questions? Mayor Wilson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Director Watson, it looks like bioslope number 5 is in direct contrast to perhaps the worst parking place in the entire facility, which has been given to me by the city administrator, Mr. Randy Knighton. So I'm concerned about this project only in the fact that my worst parking space in the entire project will be affected.
Sir, we're going to make that one the most effective.
Outstanding. No puddles for me.
Yes. Councilmember Morthland?
Director Watson, I don't know if you can answer this or not, but didn't the Auburn Safety Complex have a bunch of this out in their parking lot? Do you remember that?
They had other best management practices in their parking lot, and they all have a similar effect, that they're infiltrating water as opposed to allowing it to run off. This is just a practice that does that on a slope.
All right. Any further questions, comments? Councilmember Beeson?
I just quickly want to say too, I really do enjoy the swelling in the parking lot, the bioswales, and being able to incorporate those in other areas would be something that I would encourage Public Works moving forward. That said, I do want to reemphasize the fact that apparently EPD appreciated this project so much that they said, we'll not only give you what we discussed, but we'll give you even more. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I'm on board.
Without changing our match.
Exactly. So we're only committed to the same amount we originally committed. They're giving us more money to do this, so I'm on board.
Councilmember Morthland?
Second.
Motion to approve by Councilmember Morthland, second by Councilmember Palermo. All in favor? All right. One further item, just for clarification's sake. Obviously, we have council meeting on Monday, the 25th. These items, notwithstanding the one item that has to go through initiation and so forth, these items will be moving toward the 25th, September 25th meeting on Monday. Okay?
Awesome.
All right? Everybody good? All right. Thank you very much. That was approved. That concludes the Public Safety and Public Works Committee meeting for this evening. Motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn by Mayor Wilson, second by Councilmember Beeson. All in favor? All right. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Well done, everybody.
Okay.